Hello everybody, it's Benny from Kawaii Cosplay, and today I have a very quick tutorial for all of you costume makers out there about how to turn 3D models into foam patterns using the free software Blender. This is also the same process I'm using to make all the cool foam patterns you can find on our webshop on kawaiicosplay.com. And the process is not completely streamlined yet, so I'm still working on a couple of things, but I hope this technique is useful for you anyway. So I would say let's just hop over to my computer. So first, let's start up Blender. If you don't have it installed yet, you can download it for free from blender.org. I'm currently on the newest version, which is 2.91. But anything above version 2.8 should work just the same. To start with my fancy horn project, I'm opening a head scan I have of Svetlana. Now this is just for size reference. You can download any 3D head model you find on the internet as well, or just make a head scan of yourself. If you're interested, let me know in the comments down below and maybe I can make a video tutorial about it in the future. Also, if you're interested in 3D modeling and printing in general, go check out our 3D printing book for cosplay. It includes everything you need to know to get started with the whole thing. It's a lot of fun and Svetlana would be super disappointed if I didn't mention it in this video, so go to kawaiicosplay.com. Okay, so now I have my head scan. One other thing I need is the Export Paper Model add-on. For that, just go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons and search for Paper. There you can just activate the add-on, or if you can't find it, Google for it, download it and install it over the Install button. Easy stuff. Once activated, you can find it to the right here under the Paper tab. By the way, if you don't even know what Blender is, maybe check out my Blender introduction video first, which I'm gonna link here in the info box. So watch that to get started. So I also didn't change any scene settings, so these values here are all standard once you create a new file. So what I found out is that if you export a paper model from these standard Blender settings, you need to export them at a scale of 1:100, so they end up in real life size. I've written that for myself in a big glowy note so that I never forget. Anyway, let's quickly create a cube here, scale it up to fit between Svetlana's eyes. You can see in the dimension box here that the distance between her eyes is 6.16 meter. Taking our factor of 1:100 into account, that's 6.16 centimeter. Now I quickly want to verify that this is correct by exporting a paper model of that cube. For that I'm applying all the transformations and move it a bit to the side. Then with the cube selected, let's click on the Paper tab, choose which paper format we want. Make sure the scale is set to 1:100 and click on Export. Here you can find a few additional settings, like if you want to create gluing tabs or registration numbers. Then just hit Export. Okay, if I look at the generated PDF file in Illustrator, I can see that it worked. It correctly unfolded the cube, added glue tabs to the sides and numbers that would help me glue everything together. Nice. The size is also correct, 6.16 centimeters for the length and 2 centimeters for the width. Okay, great, so that worked. Let's go to Blender. So now what if I want all of the sides separately? For that, just select the cube, go to Edit Mode, then Edge Selection, and select all of the edges individually or simply press A on your keyboard to select them all. Then right-click on the cube and select Mark Seam. This will mark all of your selected seams in a highlighted red. Now back to the Object mode and select Paper Export again. Perfect, now I have all of my sides individually. It's just a bit too much info for my taste, so I'm gonna go back to Export, deselect tabs and numbers, export again, and voila, all the pieces are now individual. Perfect, just what I want, so far so good for the basics. Now let's delete the cube and actually make some horns. To get some good reference images, I did a quick Google search for epic ram horns. And look at this, these are so amazing. Those super twisted shapes are exactly what I want. So I downloaded a couple of pictures to my desktop and placed them inside my Blender scene as reference images. That's good. Now I can look at them all the time while I make my own horns. By the way, I'm sure there's like a million different ways to make these horns a better way, like including some really smart ideas and math and stuff like that, but I'm not that clever. I'm just gonna make my horns out of a lot of cubes. So let's create a cube to start and place it on Svetlana's forehead. I'm just using move and rotate here to find the right spot. Like I said, if you want to learn the Blender basics first, maybe check out the beginner video down below. Then when I'm satisfied, I'm going to edit mode and select the face that points backwards. Now I press E on my keyboard and extrude this face outwards. Then with the face selected, I can move, rotate and scale it to create another section of my horn. Yeah, that's good. The rest is basically rinse and repeat. I extrude again and move it around until I'm satisfied. At this point I'm just looking at my reference images and basically eyeball the shape. You can always go back in and edit all of those previous rings as well. Just go to the edge select and double click on a line to select the whole loop. Now here's a cool trick. If you leave edit mode again and go down to the modifier tab, you can add a new one and select subdivision surface. This will subdivide your cube and make it look round. I'm adding another subdivision level here, but I also don't want my horns to look completely round, just the top. I want the bottom side to be angled. So for that I'm going back to edit mode and select the two downward facing lines with a double click. In the item window you can find a setting called mean crease. Just slide it up a bit and see what happens. Boom! The top stays round and the bottom is angled. Nice! I'm also doing this to the front and just a bit on the top side, so the horns look more interesting and fit better to her forehead. Then I'm just continuing to extrude the shape outwards and continue the twist. I'm also going back to edit the overall shape all the time. I didn't say this was the easiest way to make a horn, remember? So I'm gonna fast forward here a bit because the following steps are just the same over and over again. And this is the final horn shape I ended up with. It's not 100% the same shape as in my reference images, but I like the shape and I think it will look cool as a foam horn. If you want to see the left and the right side of your horn, just add a mirror modifier here. Yeah, this looks pretty good. So I guess I'm done. Next I'm applying my subdivision modifier here. Select everything and remove the mean crease. With the modifier applied, that's just how the horn looks now. So we don't need it anymore. Before we do any exporting though, make sure to apply all the transformations again, because otherwise it might screw up your scale. Okay, nice. So let's try to export our new horn as a paper model first. But there's an error saying some faces need to be triangulated first. Okay, no problem. Just select everything by pressing A on your keyboard, right click and triangulate faces. Okay, export again. Next error! It's too large for the paper. Yeah, so I guess we should add some seams first. So go back to edit mode and edge selection. Now placing seams is an art in and of itself, but in my example here I'm just gonna select the two hard edges at the inside of the horn with shift and double click and mark these as a seam. Plus I'm adding the forehead section and the pointy end as well. And just for the heck of it, I'm also selecting the back side edge and the middle of the leftover round shape. At this point I'm just trying to imagine how the seams would work on EVA foam. Like you can stretch EVA foam, but not so much. So if it's too round, it's better to place another seam in the middle. I'm also removing the inside of the forehead section and the pointy end because I don't really need these pieces. Plus I think the foam horn slices might end up too long. So I'm making a loop selection around the middle of the horn and split it in half. Then with all of our seams marked, let's triangulate again and export to paper. For this I'm selecting a larger paper format as well, since I'm guessing A4 would be too small for this. And export. Looks like it worked. Let's see what we got. Yup, that's what happens. You end up with a lot of stupid little pieces. Now all of this here is sadly completely useless for foam patterns. Now what happens is the program is exporting everything for paper, like it's called paper model export. So you can't stretch paper, so the program is trying to cut everything apart so that you can lay it down flat. And that's sadly extremely useless for EVA foam. Now I spent quite some time trying to find a way to remedy this and get proper foam patterns. Sadly, the paper model export add-on does not feature currently any settings for stretchy materials, which would be truly amazing. So I had to figure out another way. And what I came up with is this. Up here in Blender is a tab called UV editing. UV editing is usually needed for people who make 3D models for movies or video games. And in here you can create a UV map, which is basically like the skin of your 3D model. People usually need this for creating textures for their models, but I thought, well, maybe I can use this for cosplay? So better pay attention now. I select my horn and then see a weird blob of lines to my left. Now go up to UV and click on UV Unwrap. Boom! Now this is beautiful. UV unwrapping a 3D model for textures is apparently super similar to what we need for EVA foam, because like the surface it's a little bit stretched. And that's exactly what we need. You can also select all of these little islands here and move them around to get a nicer looking layout. Let me fast forward this again a bit. Just beautiful. Okay, now let's go to UV and export UV layout. Here, select all the UVs and make the image size a little bit bigger, so it's not ending up super blurry. Let me open that up in Illustrator, and perfect. That's exactly what we need. A cosplayer's dream come true. So now I have the shape of my horns, but I'm not completely done yet. I still have a hard time knowing which part belongs where and how large this pattern actually is. UV unwraps do not care about any scale, so this image here could be 1 centimeter or 1,000 centimeters large at this point. So back to Blender. Next I'm going to the Texture Paint tab at the top. I want to draw some markings here on my 3D model. So I'm clicking here to create a new texture image and also give it the same size as my UV export, just to make sure, and make it white as a background. Good. Now select the new image we created here in the texture slot and we can draw on our model. Awesome! So first I'm numbering all of my pieces just so I know what piece on my UV map belongs where on my 3D model. Okay, nice. So next I'm going to add some glue marks, so when I glue these pieces together later, I know where these pieces should meet. Zip. Zip. And finally, when I'm done, I'm going to Image and Save As to save this on my desktop. Now open it up in Illustrator again, and it's right here. Awesome. Let's just copy this one, go to our UV map, create a new layer underneath it, and paste the texture inside of here. Awesome, now that's a great looking pattern. I would totally print this one out as it is, but I still have no idea how large it is. So back to Blender, and let's get some size reference. So I haven't found a better way to do this, so if you know one, let me know in the comments down below. But what I do is I select a small part of my horn, for example these two faces here where the number 1 is marked, and go to right click, separate and selection. This will turn these two polygons into a separate object, which I now can triangulate again and export with my paper export plugin. So let's open this one up, remove the dotted lines here and copy it on top of our UV and texture image. As you can see, the image is a bit too large, so our scale was actually off by quite a bit. Now I'm gonna scale this one down until it fits. And then finally, after all these steps, I have a working, stretched, marked and real-life patterns I can work with. At this point you can totally print it out already, transfer it to foam and build your own awesome foam horns. But since Velana and I offer these patterns in our shop, I usually go the extra mile and clean these up and make them look way more professional. Plus, what you should not forget is that there are angled edges in these 3D models. For example here, the angle between slice number 3 and number 5 is almost 90 degrees. So you need to cut your foam at an angle here to get the same result in real life. So these two edges here in our drawing need an indication, so we do not forget to cut them angled. Since the angle is around 90 degrees to the outside, we in return need to cut the foam to the inside. Well, and this is how the pattern looks after I cleaned them up quite a bit in Illustrator. I do this with all the patterns in our shop, so they have markings what part goes where, which direction you need to cut the angles, and all of that. We already made a ton of different patterns for horns, masks, skulls, hats and armor pieces for our shop, so if you have no time to make your own patterns, just go and download ours from kamuicosplay.com. But anyway, now my patterns are done and I'm ready to print them so Svetlana can turn them into real foam horns. And since there's a pandemic going on and I have no idea what to do with my time, I'm gonna show you this quickly as well. But before that, a word from our sponsor. I'm using Adobe Illustrator a lot, no matter if it is for costume pattern making or drawing our blueprints. If you're looking for more info on how to use this super awesome program, I can recommend you to watch Daniel Scott's Adobe Illustrator Essential class on Skillshare. In his class he goes over all the basics from drawing simple shapes and explaining all the uses for the many tools you have at hand, but also dives deeper into working with different color profiles, creating pretty gradients, working with text, and even shows you a few cool secrets even I didn't know about after using this program for many years. So if you're looking into getting started with Illustrator, this is definitely a great place to check out. Other than that, Skillshare is a huge online learning community full of inspiring classes for creative people like you and me. It offers countless hours of educational content on illustration, design, photography, video editing, productivity, lifestyle, and so much more. The first 1,000 people to use the code in my video description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. So hurry up and check out all of these helpful classes. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now let's continue. So let's finally print out these patterns. It's always exciting to see if the work you did on the computer first will actually turn out how you imagined it. I still remember that the first patterns I did with this technique had a lot of issues, so I kept improving on the process every time until I ended up with this workflow. Generally, I do most of the digital work on my computer, while Svetlana, on the other hand, is more of a hands-on type of gal. So I'd say we make a pretty efficient team. Anyway, as you can see, she is taping together the paper and cutting out all the individual pattern pieces. To clip out the registration marks, we have this awesome pattern notcher. I'm gonna put a link to it down in the video description for you. Also, for the horns, she's using 5mm low-density EVA foam. For the round shape, the material here needs to be stretched quite a bit, and that may be a bit hard with high-density foam. So she's simply tracing all the pattern pieces to foam and then cutting them out one after the next. Of course, she's also cutting out the edges at an angle when she has to. So after she's done and put some order into this chaos, it's time to glue everything together. First the halves. See, I knew it was a good idea to split them in half. And then the rest of the slices, just one piece after the next. Since the horns are so rounded, you need to squeeze the material quite a bit so that the registration marks all line up with each other. Next came the angled inside parts of the horns. Things might look a little bit complicated here, but you just have to follow the lines and work your way through it. Plus, closing the last remaining seam is always the hardest part, since you need to wrap your hands all around the whole thing, which can be quite difficult with small hands. But hey, that looks great! The horn turned out really good. Now she just had to flip the patterns around and make another mirrored horn for the other side. And woohoo! That's how the finished foam horns turned out. I really like them. As you can see, working with a head scan made sure the horns would end up in the right size. But it still fits me as well. Roar! And that is all. I hope this way too long and probably way too technical video was helpful for your own projects. I know content like this is not very shareable or maybe not even very entertaining, but I'm sure there's a couple of people out there right now stuck with their own projects who might find a more in-depth video like this very useful. So this was for you. If you have more questions about our pattern making process or just how we make costumes in general, please just leave me a comment down below. Or if you quickly want to download some patterns to build something at home, you can do that over on kamuicosplay.com. As always, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, consider supporting us over on Patreon or join the Corgi squad. Write down Corgi in the comments down below and help us with the YouTube algorithm. It's very much appreciated. Hopefully my next video will not take another 11 months to finish, but at this point I'm past making promises. So I guess see you in the very distant future. Bye-bye! And here's a shout out to all our super sponsors on Patreon for this week's episode. Here goes! Thanks so much to Dark Industries Cosplay, Emma, Lisa, Luisa Perez, Matrices, Maloops, and it's Nico Cosplay. Thanks so much, and also to all our other Patreons.